All right, everybody, this is 5-6 to 5-9. It's the hypodermis and then some of the accessory glands and organs. So, I know I've said it before, but let me say it one last time, or maybe it won't be the last time. The hypodermis is really superficial fascia. If you remember back to the last chapter, and we're showing you the architecture of the body, we talked about superficial fascia and deep fascia and subserous fascia. And we talked about, and to remind you, we talked about compartment syndrome, where pressure building up in some of these compartments can pinch nerves and do some serious damage. And we talked about a fasciotomy, which is cutting the fascia to relieve that pressure. So the hypodermis is the first layer of this architecture where we have fascia or fascia. Some people pronounce it fascia, surrounding your bones and muscles and your viscera. The hypodermis is superficial fascia. The primary connective tissue in the superficial fascia, the hypodermis in other words, is adipose. And if you don't recall what subcategory adipose is, remember that we have connective tissue proper, and under connective tissue proper we have loose and dense. And since adipose is towards the loose side, underneath that we had adipose, areolar, and reticular. And what we're talking about here is adipose, the fat cells, the adipocytes, are the primary connective tissue in the hypodermis. All right, so that's where we're at. We have adipocytes filled with, they may or may not be filled with adipose in your hypodermis. And this is a scanning electron micrograph of these adipocytes in the hypodermis. Everybody has a little bit or a lot. It depends on your body type and your BMI and things like that. But everybody has adipose in their hypodermis, and there is a sexual dimorphism, which means men and women store different amounts in different places in their body. And I think I have a picture showing you that. So this is the adipocytes in the hypodermis. Oh yeah, there's the picture. This is the sexual dimorphism. So what I mean by sexual dimorphism, every time I say that, because I say it several times throughout both courses, it means that there's a difference between men and women. That's all it means. So if you're a man, you do this physiologically, and if you're a woman, you do this physiologically. Now, this is not a social issue. This happens to be a physiological fact. And if you look at the men, we store a lot of our hypodermal fat in our abdomen right there. It looks like, from what our book's telling us, is that we also pack it onto our thighs and our buttocks. This I can absolutely relate to. These love handles. Hate them. I wish men didn't store fat on their love handles. I wish we hid it someplace, but yeah, we store them in our love handles. We got those big love handles sticking off. Now, where do women store it? Well, as you know, I have sisters and a mom and things like that. So unfortunately, for women, they store a lot of their hypodermal fat in their breast region, and that's one of the biggest complaints I hear from, say, my mother or my sisters or my nieces and my not my nephews, but my nieces, is that yeah, if they lose weight, their breasts get smaller, and that's not necessarily what they want. But hey, that's the fact. Women also store some hypodermal fat on their hips. You can see that there. Now, right here, right behind the neck, right there, I don't think it's a great amount of hypodermal fat stored there normally, but there is a disease where you put a lot of hypodermal fat right behind your neck like that, and that disease is called Cushing's disease. Cushing's disease is a cortisol disease, an adrenal cortex disease, and cortisol. And what it does is it causes you to pack a lot of fat onto the back of your neck and between your shoulder blades, between your scapula, and it gives you this humpback appearance. So you can see that in some diseases. All right, so that's hypodermal fat. One of the accessory structures is the hair. What I want you to think about is that the hair is like taking your finger and pushing the epidermis down into the dermis. That's what I want you to think. How I want you to think of this. So this is the stratum germinativum of the epidermis right here. Now, what are the cells of the hair that cause the hair to grow? These stem cells down here. Now, they're not called stratum germinativum anymore, but they are derived from the stem cells of the stratum germinativum. So these are the cells that allow this hair to grow. And there's receptors on this hair follicle, and they're called 5-alpha HT receptors. They're called hydroxytestosterone receptors. And when you have high testosterone and they bind these receptors, the hair stops growing. And this leads to male pattern baldness. So if you've ever heard it said in some popular literature on the TV or something that testosterone causes male pattern baldness, it is indeed true. Testosterone binds these 5-hydroxytestosterone receptors right down in here, and they turn off the growth of the hair, and that can lead to male pattern baldness. So that's the hair. You can see that the hair follicle contains the hair shaft, and we'll look at a cross section of the hair shaft. A lot of times the hair is associated with the sebaceous gland. The sebaceous gland secretes sebum onto the shaft of the hair, and it lubricates it and keeps it pliable. If you, for some reason, quit producing sebum, your hair will become brittle. Oftentimes your hairs have an erector pili muscle. It's a smooth muscle. It's under involuntary control. They have that muscle hooked to the hair follicle, and when it contracts, your hair stands upright, and when it's relaxed, your hair is laying down. And different things can make that contract. Being cold can make it contract. Your hair stands up. That's a throwback to the day when we were very furry, and if we stood up all of our hairs, it conserved heat. The sympathetic nervous system can make this erector pili muscle contract, and when you're scared or frightened, that'll contract and your hair will stand on end. So that's a hair follicle and a hair shaft and a sebaceous gland. This is why I keep telling you to think of the hair follicle as the epidermis pushed down, because it indeed is. See, this is the epidermis, and if you push deep and keep pushing deeper and keep pushing deeper, you have finally formed this hair follicle that the hair shaft's going to grow out of. So that when I say that this is the stratum germinativum up here, and then these stem cells down here from which the hair grows are really derivatives of the stratum germinativum, they really are. So that's why I wanted you to think of that. And these weeks right here, don't memorize these weeks of embryonic weeks of hair growth. Please please do not remember that. All right, so that's the development of a hair follicle in the hair shaft. You can see the cross section of the hair right here. How much of this do I want you to know? Not much, really. I really just want you to know the hair shaft exists inside a hair follicle. I wouldn't want you to sit here and memorize that here's the connective tissue sheath. I mean, there is connective tissue around here, but don't worry about that too much. There is a translucent membrane right here. All right, it's called the glassy membrane or translucent membrane. And then this is the external root sheath, this pink stuff or whatever color you call that, purple or pink. This is the external root sheath. I'm getting to something I do want you to know. This is the internal root sheath, just under the external root sheath right here. Right there. And then this is the cuticle. Contains a lot of keratin. That's the cuticle right there. All right, that's the keratin. By the way, a rhinoceros horn, or the two horns on a rhinoceros, is really keratin. So in other words, it's kind of like hair, but it's really hard keratin, like a fingernail keratin. So a rhinoceros horn, that's very hard material, is really just keratin. And then right here is a cortex of hard keratin as well. So the cuticle has keratin in it, and the cortex has keratin in it. Now the medulla of the hair has keratin in it, but it's softer keratin. That's the medulla right there. So do I want you to memorize all of these layers? Please don't. I'm never going to test you on all these layers. But here's what I do want you to know. The hair has almost like scale structures like this. I'm drawing them here. And the follicle, the inside of the follicle, has hair structures almost like this. Well, I say almost, it's quite like this. So you can see that these scales pull, if you try to pull a hair shaft out, it would be very difficult because you got this scale-like structure of the inside of the inside of the follicle going that, and the hair itself has these scale-like structures going like that. So it's difficult to pull a hair out. Now that's not to say that you can't put a pair of tweezers on a hair and pluck it out, or put some wax on your let's say you're a swimmer and you want to wax your legs so you swim faster. Put some wax on your leg hair and pull that off. You can, but it's difficult because these scale-like structures are intertwined or overlap in opposite directions, and um, it's painful. And the only reason I know that is because my mother is a beautician, and when she was going through her beautician school, I think she was going through it when I was about 15 years old, and that's a long time ago. She was learning different things, not just to cut hair, but to do a whole bunch of different things. And one of the things she was learning was uh, waxing and things like that. And yeah, I let her wax me once. Never happen again. I'll tell you that right now. I don't know why anyone would do that. The heck with waterboarding. You want to torture somebody, just wax them. That's all you got to do. But yeah, I had my mom wax a little piece of me once just to practice. Not very pleasant. Here's a longitudinal section of the hair. So we were looking at a cross section back here, and here's a longitudinal section. It just labels the same stuff that we just labeled. And again, please don't, I wouldn't memorize all these layers. Please don't memorize all these layers. All right. This is talking about, we talked about pigmentation of your skin, and the pigmentation of the hair is very similar. We have these pigments, eumelanin, which is brownish, pheomelanin, which is yellowish. Oh, we're not showing trichosiderin. Trichosiderin or trichosiderin is reddish. I wonder why we're not showing it here, because we have a redhead right here. They're just showing you the eumelanin and the pheomelanin, and that's fine, but there's also some trichosiderin in there. That's the red color. So look at the shape of the hair. If you have straight hair, you have a relatively round hair structure. If you have curly hair, or wavy, curly or wavy, you have an oval hair structure. And when you start losing pigmentation of your hair, when you start to lose it, what happens is you've lost the pigment, plus you have an air space in the medulla in here. So this is the gray or white color that you see in here. Okay, just so you know, to tie together chapter 2 and chapter 5, if you have straight hair and you would like curly hair, what happens is you go to the beautician, you go to my mom, and my mother puts a chemical on your hair which breaks all these disulfide bonds. Cysteine is one of the amino acids. And your hair is made of proteins. Your hair is made of keratin and keratin proteins. So why your hair is either round and straight or oval and wavy or curly has to do with these proteins. Well, the beautician puts on a chemical that breaks this disulfide bond. And what it turns that cysteine into is a reduced form, just like this. And then this beautician, she wraps your hair on curls. He or she wraps your hair on curls to be the way you want it to look, either tight, like tight curls or loose curls or whatever you want. And after they're wrapped on curls, they put another chemical on your hair which reforms these disulfide bonds. But realize they're reforming the disulfide bonds in a new shape. And then over time, oxygen from the atmosphere oxidizes those bonds, break them down, and you lose your perm. So every so many weeks or months, I think your perm, I don't know how long a perm lasts. I don't usually have to worry about things like that, as you know, because you've seen my beautiful bald head. But they last, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, I guess. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. And then your beautician has to do it again. And that's all about making and breaking these disulfide bonds. All right. This is hair growth. This is not in your book, but I wanted to cover it. It's important. This is this hair right here is old hair. It's about to fall out. This is the new hair growing in right here, and this is the anagen phase of the new hair growing in. All right. This takes 6-7 years. This anagen phase is about 6 to 7 years, and then this is the anagen phase, and the hair is mature. So this is around the say 7th or 8th year or so. It takes 6 to 7 years to get from there to there. All right. And when you start growing your new hair, you push the old one out, and that's an old dead hair. It's a club hair, they call it. And then after the anagen phase, after you leave the anagen phase, this is say a 7-8 year old hair. You leave the anagen phase, you enter the catagen phase. This is when this hair starts to degenerate. You can see that it makes a club at the end, and it's pulled away from the mitotic area of the bottom of the follicle. So this hair is no longer growing, and in fact, it's beginning to fall out. But it does take a while to fall out. This lasts almost a month. It says it lasts 2 to 3 weeks, so almost a month. This catagen phase, and then lastly, you have this telogen phase right here, and this is the resting phase right here. And this club hair falls out, but it doesn't fall out immediately. It loosens up and begins to fall out. Remember the scales. Remember the scales on the inside of my follicle intercalate with the scales on my hair. So this doesn't fall out that easily. And in fact, you need the new growth of the next hair to come in to kind of push it out. So why do I show you this? Because when you get that waxing done from your beautician, if you wax this hair, it's growing back. Because you didn't really wax a hair that was actively growing. So you didn't kill it. You didn't pull out its mitotic cells. So they say waxing is a permanent way to get rid of your hair, but it takes several treatments. If you were to laser this hair, and another hair is going to grow in this follicle, they say laser is a permanent treatment. It is, but at any given time, neighboring hairs are in different phases. So the only hair that you're really going to permanently kill, and it's never going to grow back, the only hair follicle is never going to grow back, is if you kill the hair that's in this anagen phase right here. You have to kill a hair in the anagen phase for it to never grow back. So a lot of times when you do these things like electrolysis or laser or waxing, it'll take several treatments, because at any given time you're only killing some of the hairs of the anagen phase, and the ones that are catagen or telogen are going to grow back, and then you got to re-laser them or re-zap them or whatever you're doing. So that's what's going on with hair growth right there. This is sebaceous gland. Sebaceous glands can be associated with a hair follicle, and quite often are. They secrete an oily sebum onto it. However, you can see that you can have a sebaceous gland that's not associated with the hair, and the sebum just coats your skin and makes your skin nice and soft and pliable. The sebaceous glands make your skin appear oily, and a lot of people don't like that. But just so you know, that also slows the production. It slows the appearance of wrinkles. The more sebum that's on your skin makes your skin more pliable, and you're less likely to get wrinkles and stria. Oh, what are stria? Stria are stretch marks. So sebum, or something artificial you could put on you. A lot of pregnant ladies will buy this lotion that they'll rub on their abdomen every day, and it's supposed to decrease the amount of stretch marks they get from the baby growing, and indeed it does work. I mean, they might still get some stretch marks, but they've done studies, and it is a decreased amount of stretch marks using this lotion that keeps your skin very pliable and elastic. So there's sebaceous glands, sebum. The sebaceous glands are holocrine glands. To remind you, that means the cell dies to secrete its products. If you go back to chapter 4, you'll see that reminds you that there's merocrine secretions. Sweat glands are merocrine. There's apocrine secretions. and there's holocrine secretion. Sebaceous glands are holocrine. The mammary glands were actually mammary glands. They were used as an example of apocrine, but I just got to tell you that mammary glands actually have a mixture of all three of these. It's just that your text says that it's apocrine, and that's fine. We also have sweat glands. Sweat glands are also named sudoriferous. Sudoriferous, another name for sweat glands. Really, we have two types of sweat glands. We have apocrine sweat glands and we have merocrine sweat glands. However, we have found out recently, relatively recently, that really all sweat glands secrete by the merocrine-ecrine mechanism. They really all secrete that way. So why do we still call sweat glands the apocrine type and the merocrine type? Because as it turns out, the apocrine type of sweat glands that really secrete by the merocrine mechanism are different. They secrete a different product. They are found in the groin, and they are found in the axilla, your armpit area. So the groin and the axilla. And the apocrine sweat in the groin and the axilla here has some substance that bacteria love to eat. So bacteria grow very well on groin and axillary sweat, and that gives the scent to it. So that's why your body odor usually comes from groin and axillary sweat. All right, so that's the sebaceous glands and the sweat glands. Nothing new to tell you here. Oh, I'll tell you something new. As it turns out, these apocrine sweat glands secrete pheromones too. Okay, non-testable chit-chat material. There was a study done where there was an observation made with some sorority girls in college, and the observation was that they all had their menstrual cycle at the same time. They came into the sorority house all having their menstrual cycle at different times of the month, and by the end of the first year of the school, sorry about that, it's not the first year of the semester. By the end of the first year, 2 semesters, they were all menstruating at the same time. And these scientists wanted to know why, so they did a test. What they did was these sorority girls were now living different places, different states, like New York, like New Jersey, like Montana, whatever, different states. And they would wake up every morning and they'd take these cotton balls and they'd put it under their armpit. By the way, I'm drawing cotton balls under the armpit. That's what I'm drawing, in case you think it's something else. And the cotton balls under the armpits would pick up this sweat from the axillary area, and then they would seal the cotton balls into a Ziploc bag, and then they'd mail them to each other. And there's more than just 3 girls, by the way. They'd mail these Ziploc bags of sweaty cotton balls. Now, they weren't saturated with sweat. It's just insensible sweat they were picking up. And then the girls receiving the cotton balls would all smell them, put them right up to their nose and take a whiff. I know it sounds disgusting, but that's what they would do. And guess what happened? What happened was they started menstruating at the same time. So the hypothesis was that apocrine sweat glands secrete a pheromone that affects your physiology. And there's been further research on that, and some other cool things have come out because of that. But that was one test that was done. All right, the autonomic nervous system is also involved in controlling your sebaceous and sweat glands. This is the nervous sweat that you get. It might be cold out, and the palms of your hands are sweating because you're going on your first date. Well, why would that be? Because the autonomic nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system, is making you sweat, even though it's 20 below zero. So the autonomic nervous system also partially controls your sebaceous glands. And during certain times, you can have excess secretion of sebum. Now, the merocrine sweat glands are controlled. They're thermoregulatory, primarily. These are thermoregulatory. When you're hot, they sweat. When you're cold, they don't. There's not as much autonomic control over merocrine sweat glands as there is the apocrine sweat glands, because it's thermoregulatory or thermoregulation. All right, fingernails. I'm not huge into fingernails. I barely talk about them when it's a face-to-face class. I'm going to barely talk about them here. I do want you to know that it's hard keratin. So fingernails are composed of hard keratin, similar to what a little bit of hard keratin in your hair, what we talked about already. Your fingernails grow from this area right here. So they grow from here and they keep pushing out, and eventually you got to clip them off. And everyone's probably seen the pictures of the, the I forget the name of that book where you have the longest or the, you set a world record. It's in that book. I forget what the name of the book is. But if you've ever looked at the world's longest fingernails, they get real curly. They'll actually, they'll get a couple feet long and they'll curl around, and it actually looks a little bit disgusting. But uh, so fingernails. What else can I tell you about it? Not much. All right. They're no longer claws in humans. They're truncated. I mean, they keep growing, but they're not sharp claws. They can't help us climb a tree. But what they do for us is they allow us to build a grip with the anterior side of our fingers because they don't get in the way. I mean, even if cats and dogs and bears had opposable thumbs, they would have a hard time manipulating fruit off a fruit tree because they have these big claws that are going to get in the way. So having truncated fingernails the way we do, and not claws anymore, gives us the ability to have finesse and grip things and manipulate them. And that's it for that. See you in the next section.